The majority of our life is lived in liminal space.
And there's this in-between space, this liminal space.
This liminality that reveals possibility.
I think we're in a liminal moment, but also in a place of transformation.
I have great affection for the church and a troubled relationship with it.
Just to be alive in time means that we're on the threshold of the future.
That can't be the gospel, because God said to love our neighbors.
We don't know what the future looks like. We have to work it out together.
Jackie Turner, welcome back to the Liminal Living Podcast for your second appearance on this podcast. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you, and thank you for having me back.
Oh, I'd love to have you back. I wanted to have you back because you have this background in both therapy and spiritual direction, and I think I need both of those things these days with how things are just really crazy. So I just wanted to know, how are you keeping sane these days? Because these are some days. So
these are some
what's
days.
Keeping you together?
I tell you, it's been hard. But I go back to grounding with spiritual practices. So a new one that I just added is every morning doing a body prayer to the St. Patrick's breastplate song. It helps me remember that God is all around me, in me, behind me, in the eyes of those I see. And it just sort of helps me get my eyes off the news and back onto Christ. So I'm working on that.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep your eyes off the news these days because all I have to do is open up Facebook, and it's just assaulting my senses nonstop all the time, faster than I can keep up with and faster than my soul can make sense of.
Yes.
And those spiritual practices, they're really hard to maintain when you're tired and you're weary and you're exhausted and you're defeated. And I used to have real solid morning routines and night routines and journaling routines and reading and prayer and meditation and all these things. And these days when I wake up, I get my coffee and then I just sit in the chair and be like, I'm tired. I don't want to do all of the spiritual practices that might keep me in a good place. Have you found anything that is a good motivator for those of us who don't feel motivated right now?
Well, I have to tell you, I did kind of cheat. I went away for the weekend to a retreat center last weekend. And I went to this program called Listen to Your Life, and it's a lot of journaling. And because I felt like I was just barely keeping my head above water with all of the crazy, and I needed help getting grounded. So I went to an outside source, and I really feel like that helped me kind of restart. So I don't know if you have the opportunity to get away even overnight, but it really helps.
Having an outside source, that's a really good concept because I don't have it inside of me to take on the massive amounts of everything that is happening, but choosing an outside. What are some other outside sources that you can go to? I know having a retreat center or a therapist or a director like yourself.
Yeah,
what are
I
some
have a
other
spiritual
outside sources
director.
of help that we can turn to?
Yeah, spiritual director is super important. I have one that has gotten me through many hard times, and also just small groups of people who are also going through it. So you're kind of clinging to this raft together. I have a small group that I go to, and we try to help each other through, and that it makes a difference. I think community is going to get us through this.
Yeah, I think that's important. Community will get us through it. What do you do when you feel betrayed by the community that you had because of how they're leaning politically or things like that? When your community is gone because they chose to go a different direction?
Well, I went through that obviously big time, and when I was invited to leave my Christian organization because of my love for the LGBT community, I felt so betrayed, was exactly the word. And so I didn't have a community for a while, but I clung to the community of the authors that I love. So I have always found mentoring through books, Richard Rohr and John Philip Newell, and people that gave me hope for a better world. I still do that. I still have to go to my favorite authors and find rest.
Well, I know that social media can be that. It can be a place of connecting with other folks. But these days it feels like social media is no longer an escape from the problems of the world into a community where you can talk about, your latest interests or whatever. It seems like now social media is a dive right into the heart of the massive problems that we're facing. Even if you agree with the sides that you see when you open up your Facebook feed or whatever, Twitter, what's the other one? Instagram. I'm old. I don't know these things.
TikTok.
But like you open it, and even if you agree with everyone's perspectives that's there, it's like there's no escapes anymore. It's just being thrust in front of you. I think we're gonna have to find different avenues of community and escape, and not to say that what's being said on social media isn't important or needs to be, but it just seems like it's on like a fire hose blast. So
And that's what the thing I came back with from the retreat was to limit my exposure to social media. And I still have to use social media as an author. I have to use a lot of it, but I can get lost in just scrolling and just, reels and waste so much time and energy. And I thought, if I could just stick to what I need to do, the people I need to talk to and interact with, and then turn it off. So that's my new thing I'm trying is just, half an hour in the morning, a half an hour in the evening. Try to stay away.
okay, you can tell me if this is a spiritual practice or not, because I'm not sure. But this is something that I've done when I notice that I am doing the reel scroll and just sucked into reel after reel, which is so easy to get sucked into. I made a pact with myself around the beginning of this month. I said, if I find myself stuck in watching reels on repetitive thing, I'm going to instead shut that off and open up The Simpsons and watch an episode of The Simpsons, because I'd feel much better about myself at the end of a Simpsons episode than at the end of 30 minutes of doom scrolling on Facebook. So is
Yes.
this a spiritual practice, or is that just a
Yes. Well,
psychological ploy?
I believe everything done with intention is a spiritual practice. I have a whole blog called Spiritual Practices 101, and I put things like walking and singing and yoga. Whatever you're doing that's helping you is a spiritual practice, and I do the same thing. I gave myself grace this year. My word is actually frolic for the year because I don't frolic and I don't know how. I'm too intense and too driven. So for me, frolicking might be watching an episode of The Simpsons because that gives me joy and helps me laugh and get outside all the doom scrolling and reading good books. I'm really hooked on what they call cozy fantasy now. It's all about
Okay.
tea shops and baking and I just think
Yes.
they're delightful. Nobody's dying. Nobody has a gun. I just like that to get lost in those kind of books.
I lost myself in a sci-fi series that I fell in love with as a teenager, and it is called Ender's Game.
Oh,
And
yeah?
I dove back into it with the audiobook version and then I decided to listen to the whole series. So I just got to the second book, but I was just so surprised. I read that it was published in I think '84, the first one.
Wow.
I read it as a young teenager. I would walk to my library in Redford, Michigan, and that was the first book that ever blew my mind with a twist ending, and I was hooked. And I always go back to that one, and how the story is just so applicable today. So that was my spiritual practice, was getting lost in in a sci-fi series that was really good. That and The Simpsons. So these are spiritual practices you're telling me.
Yes, of
So
course.
I'm taking note. These can be
Well,
spiritual when done with intention.
I just re-listen to every single Harry Potter. So I'm in a bad place when I have to re-listen to Harry Potter again for the
Oh,
17
was it the
millionth.
Jim Dale version?
Yeah, it's always Jim Dale for
He
me.
is such a good he's such a good actor. He actually set a Guinness Book World Record for most amount of characters in one audiobook.
It had to
Uh,
be one of those, right?
yeah, it was one of the later ones. I think it was book 6. I can't remember, but he set the record for most amount of characters acted out in one audiobook because he gives every single person its own character.
And remembers
Even
them
the,
over
you know, the
time. I don't know how he
yeah,
does it. It's crazy.
he did such a good job with that. Well, I would like to talk about what feels like we're in a liminal moment, very drastically, politically, economically, religiously. I would say those words even before November, but now post-November, it just feels like the full unraveling of the foundations of everything we know, and that's a little bit dystopian to me. So I'd like to talk a little bit about liminality with you, but specifically from your angle of being an author, being a spiritual director, being a therapist, being a practitioner of the spiritual life. Um, it feels like since 2016, like this deconstruction thing has been in full gear. I know it's been a thing for a lot longer, but that seems to be one of the major points when I talk with someone who says, I have deconstructed, or I have left the faith, or I have something along those lines. Most of the people I talk to point back to the 2016 election of Donald Trump and just saying, I cannot believe that the family values party that I grew up with, chose this, real estate playboy from New York as their front person. So that seems to be where we're at, but now even more intensified. It wasn't like a plug your nose and we'll vote for him. It was more of like a celebration of his character and who he is. And that is just furthering this, I guess, divide between two different types of Christians I see rising up right now. What would you say are the genuine differences, if any, you can take it that direction, between deconstruction and like total loss of faith or even a total renunciation of it? Do you see like finer distinctions between these categories of groups, or is it all kind of the same thing?
Well, being a writer, I'm going to tell you an analogy of the butterfly. So I've been thinking a lot about the butterfly lately, how when it goes into its cocoon, it has to completely dissolve into primordial goo. But there's something cool inside there called imaginal cells, and it has to imagine itself as a butterfly so it can be born anew. And I think we're just in the primordial goo right now. We're just, everything is falling apart, not just our faith, but our country, our everything. And so we are in the goo, and it's okay to cocoon. It's okay to be there, to rest, to not have the answers, to sift through the goo, to look for those imaginal cells, to see what good can come of this. It's hard to find good that can come of this, but throughout history, throughout my history, when I look back on the hardest times of my life, God has always been there. It says when you pass through the fire, when you go through the water. It doesn't say if. God will be with you. And so trying to sit in that goo and trust that God is in it and look for those imaginal cells, like what good thing can I do today? Keeping my eyes open for those moments where I can give kindness and love. And I think deconstruction is about a lot of things, and I think it happens over our lifetime in a lot of different ways. I also believe God is in that, and we will be okay, one way or another. Might not look like it did before.
I like that imaginative cells. We have to imagine yourself as a butterfly. I never knew that. I knew they turned into goo because we did like all these studies when the kids were little, and I learned a whole lot of stuff about nature that I never knew, and I didn't know that they just turned into like soup inside of there. That was really interesting, but I didn't know that what brought them back together was imagination. That is really interesting. What practices can we do that help us hold on to imagination when we don't believe that it's going to be any better for a very long time?
I think all of the arts, if historically, are what get us through. So anything you can do that's creative is going to help your soul. Even if you don't normally paint, try painting. Even if you don't write poetry, write poetry. A journal, like you said, or sing. Anything that taps into the creative spirit within is going to give life and joy and respite. We need respite. If you like music, listen to music. I just think those imaginal cells are waiting for us to give them some airtime through creativity. And perhaps then we'll be able to see a way out.
Do you think that those imaginative cells can stand in for hope when we don't have any?
Yeah, I hope so. I went to this retreat feeling very bad. They were reading this passage from Isaiah about God being with you. Do not fear when you go through the fire, when you go through the water. And I didn't believe it. I'm like, oh, hell no. I don't believe that. I don't believe God's with me. I don't believe God's going to take care of my queer grandchildren. I am in total panic mode right now for the first 2-3 days. And then I looked out the window and there was this big, bushy, green, thick tree. And hidden in the branches was this tiny blue bird. And it was just this picture of it was sheltering in there. And I thought, that's the way my life has been in the hard times. I've had to shelter in the safety of that place because nothing feels safe to me right now. So I'm trying to just have those images that I can find of shelter, of safety, of cocooning. Sometimes I just lay in bed and picture myself cocooning, pull the covers over. We have to do that. We have to care for our fragile little souls when they're all mushy.
Yeah. I think we are going through kind of an institutional disillusionment. That's a big part of deconstruction, where one of the good parts about this thing that I can see is we're actually seeing the exposed underbelly of a lot of the religious institutions and how they've really just, there's a lot of abuse that has been present for a very long time, and they've built these systems of control and manipulation that we thought we had to fit inside of. And so there is an exposing of that, almost like a revelation, like an apocalyptic moment where we're getting to see inside. It's almost like we're living in Revelation, but not from like a Hagee kind of a perspective, but like we're living in this apocalyptic moment. And like the systems that we have built our lives around are unraveling, being exposed as abusive and corrupt and a lot of people don't want to see that. But there's this institutional disillusionment that seems to be very present in all of our society. What role do you think that community and or contemplative practices could play in rebuilding faith later on after this moment is kind of past? What role do they play in kind of rebuilding something that might not be so institutional that we're going to have to organize ourselves some way and be an institution? But how do we, I guess, steer clear of the corruptness and all that? What can we do that when we do get into rebuilding, I'm going to land on a question, I promise. What practices can we do that will help us rebuild one day in something that's not so corrupt in the core?
It's a big question, right?
It is.
I guess for me, it always boils down to love and kindness, because what we've got now, it ain't working. And I don't know how you build something out of love and kindness, except brick by brick every day. Since we're in this period of crazy, I've focused on highlighting authors, Black authors, for Black History Month every day, trying to promote Black books. I really don't know, other than community and kindness and love, and ways that we can try to do that, because hope is the only thing I have to hang on to, that something good can come out of these changes. If I don't have hope, I don't have much.
Something just occurred to me. You said you were promoting Black authors for Black History Month. And reading people like Howard Thurman and James Cone and Martin Luther King Jr. really changed a lot of my perspectives on things. And something, I just talked with Danny Bryant last week, and something he said really struck me. He says, when we rebuild, we can't be the ones that maintain control over it. We have to give that authority away to other people and see what they can do with it. And that's the hard part there, is because I think naturally you just don't trust something that I didn't have a say in totally manipulating and controlling and building and then a system out of it. But I think we need to share. Not just give it all away, but we really need to share authority with people who are not like us. And that's one thing I don't see happening in the church. It's more of like a consolidation of that white male patriarchal, like we are going to regain control and dominance, and then really enforce that upon all of society, instead of sharing that control in ways that can build something a little bit more kind and merciful. That's a thought that just kind of came to me when you were talking.
Yeah, I think we have to learn from those that have always suffered, right? People of margin have always suffered. Women have their own set of sufferings. And we need those voices to be heard if we're going to create something new. Your idea that it's hard to trust something you can't control and have built is a very male idea.
It is.
Women have always had to trust in things they can't control and haven't
Yeah,
built. But yeah,
absolutely.
so we're going to have to listen to those voices that are unlike ours, and this isn't new to them. Suffering is not new to them. It hurts us because we've been privileged, but to them it's like, yeah, here we go again. Our Jewish friends are like, yeah, here we go again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. Now, one of the problems that I have faced in, recent weeks, as this administration is just rolling out things faster than I can keep up with, faster than even like our government can keep up with, and just unraveling and destroying and chainsawing and hacking and everything. It really gives me a sense of betrayal by friends and family who I know voted in a different direction than I did. And I guess it's just really hard for me to maintain a sense of connection to folks that voted for what we are seeing happening, whether they had a picture in their mind of what was going to happen or not. How do we have political conversations with folks when the polarity that exists seems to be like oil and water, and there is no way to match it, and we feel so betrayed?
And I wonder how many are starting to think, what was I doing? If there
Buyer's
was
remorse.
Yeah, if there was a safe place for them to question that, I wonder if they are feeling this betrayal too. I mean, I've got to believe that because, just slashing all of our national parks and rolling back, fighting with our nearest neighbors. I mean, I don't think anybody saw these things coming except the people that designed it. But I, if there's a way to create a safe place to really listen to each other, I think that would be the place to start. But of course, that's always the hardest place because people just want to argue. But if you could have an open discussion and really hear each other, like, how do you feel about this? What's going on for you? I would love to tell someone that voted for Trump what's happening with my family, how my daughter is taking her children and her 3 giant dogs and her 3 cats and driving 2,000 miles to Mexico because she wants them to be safe and she doesn't feel safe here. I mean, that is terrifying for me. And I don't know if people realize when they threaten an entire people group, how that affects those of us who have those people in our family. I don't know if they know. It's devastating.
Yeah. We have a disabled son. He's 21, and seeing the dismantling of the systems that were in place that we could pull from to help him is like terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
what are they going to take from us that we have been really needing, because they're slashing things. And it seems like if it doesn't benefit, that whole corporate mindset of the bottom line and the profits and all that, that just doesn't seem to be a consideration. My betrayal feelings are not just, oh, you voted differently than me, but you voted against somebody that I love.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that somebody like you know my son, and you voted a different way, and now his life is going to be worse. And I have just this sense of betrayal, and I don't know how to have conversations with family and friends that went that direction, that I just feel like you've not only just voted different than me, but you voted against somebody I love. And now that's going to cause harm for
To
my
my
family
family.
and for us. Like, what does empathy look like in that situation from me? Do I need to have it? Should I have it? Or do I just like close doors? Like, how does this work as a Christian and wanting to remain some kind of stance of love and compassion, but also knowing this did some harm?
Yeah. Well, I think people need to know it did harm, and I can't imagine that there aren't millions of people on that voted that way who now are like, wait, I have a disabled child, or wait, I have a gay cousin, or wait, my husband's from Mexico. I have to believe it's affecting them as well. But cocooning is about protecting yourself, and it's okay to protect yourself right now from people who aren't willing to listen and just want to fight. You don't have to at all be in that. You don't have to. You don't have to be in that space. It's not healthy for anybody.
There's probably a fine line between protective shielding and like actual vulnerability. If you become over vulnerable, you can get hurt, but if you totally shut down, then that can also hurt you. So I guess there's some fine line somewhere between maintaining a sense of vulnerability with those folks, but also some kind of a boundary where it won't really sear your soul if it goes south.
Yeah, I think we have to protect ourselves, and yeah, we can't cut off all of our heart because then we can't receive love either. If we cut off our heart to everything, there's no room for love and compassion. So yeah, it's a delicate balance, isn't it?
Yeah. If we do need to have those conversations, what tools would you recommend to somebody who needs to have a hard conversation with a friend or family member about political reality, without it being too searing, but also being honest and open. Where's that? What tools could we use in a conversation like that would protect us, but also kind of put us out there?
I think storytelling is always powerful.
Ooh.
Stories have always been how we've communicated pain. So if I was sitting with you and you told me the story about your son, my heart could not respond to that. And I would feel your pain and I would be sad. And I think if we tell those stories in whatever way we can and humanize each other, because you can't hate someone that you've humanized. It's when it's us and them that we can hate. And I think looking for that of God in people and trying to touch that part and telling stories.
I like the storytelling part. I think that is, yeah. And then listening to someone else's story instead of, like, when I get in a political conversation, I want to communicate the facts. Like, well, here's all the facts and really it ends up just being commentary on the news that I listen to commentators myself, and then they bring their commentators from their news sources, and then we just throw commentary at each other, and then nobody's convinced and walks away.
No.
But instead of bringing a story to it, which I'm not trying to, like, those news commentators can really help us make sense of things that are going on. It's really hard to just throw commentary at each other from our news sources because again, it's like oil and water. They're not mixing, but the story then becomes like that middle ground of now we can actually talk with one another.
Talk story. I had lunch with a friend who's voted differently, and and we were just talking about our kids. And so in the midst of talking about our kids, I was able to say, "Wow, I'm really scared right now. This is what my daughter's doing." And she heard it. She heard the story. I didn't say anything about why or the politics or how. I just told the story. So I know that she received the story. What she does with that story is out of my hands.
Yeah. What voices are you listening to right now that help you not only just make sense of the mess that we're in politically, economically, religiously, but also breathe some kind of life into your soul? What are those voices for you right now?
Well, politically, I will occasionally listen to Heather Cox Richardson because she seems to make sense.
She's
sort
a
of,
dear. Yes, we love Heather Cox Richardson.
yes. And then I'm rereading a book by Sue Monk Kidd called When the Heart Waits, I think it's called. When the Heart
I
Waits.
read that one a while ago.
Yeah. And it has that whole analogy of the butterfly, which is why I've been thinking about it so much. How important it is to let go, to cocoon, to deconstruct, to reconstruct. It's all in that book.
I've been trying to maintain, as a pastor, like, I don't want somebody who is just conservative or Republican to feel uncomfortable in a worship service, just because of their political affiliation. Because I know I would feel uncomfortable stepping into a Southern Baptist church that's, waving MAGA flags down front. I would not feel comfortable there.
Wouldn't go in there.
I don't
Wouldn't
want
be
to
safe.
be. I wouldn't even step in the parking lot. But I don't want to just be the reverse side of the same coin at the same time. How can we cultivate community spaces where we can't just be like amoral or apolitical, and yet a church has never been a political machine, should never have been it is now, but should never have been a political machine. How can we cultivate a safe space where we can have those conversations and everything is not being politicized all the time? Like, what can a church or a small community do that not necessarily maintains neutrality, but is a space where you can have these conversations? It's really hard.
I've been interviewing a lot of my pastor friends lately with this question, and I love that they all boil down to the same thing. We talk about Jesus, right? I mean, that's pretty political these days. What did he do? He stood up to the government. He loved the marginalized. He healed people, you know? So you don't have to talk about politics to talk about politics, because Jesus, if we follow Jesus, it's very political and radical and all of those things. But you don't have to say that to just talk about Jesus.
I don't want like my Sunday message and whole worship service to rotate around whatever the news has declared the most important thing. We have a liturgy to do. We have, the liturgical cycle to follow, readings that need to be done. And I find that those readings, when you know the culture and the political and religious environment of the gospel times, it does make a lot of sense for today. But at the same time, we have the Church of Germany in the 30s not standing up to Hitler and his hostile takeover. And they receive a lot of criticism from their silence and just not wanting to rock the boat. And so how do we maintain this space that we're talking about, but not take the route of the quiet Church of Germany when Hitler took power?
Yeah, that's huge, because it feels like it's happening all over again, even in Germany, which is quite unsettling.
Yes.
I think when we have opportunity to speak up, we need to speak up. If we, for instance, this is an interesting story. My friend told me yesterday in the parking lot. Her son lives in Brooklyn, and he came out of a building, and there was a policeman chasing a black man, and the black man's younger brother was videotaping, and screaming the whole time. Well, crowds of people came around and surrounded them so that the other police cars couldn't get close because they didn't want him to be shot unnecessarily, right? It's okay to arrest someone if they're doing something wrong, but as we know, things can get out of hand. And I thought, oh, how interesting. People are looking for opportunities to stand up for justice in places where they can and should. And if we just try to keep our eyes open every day, what can I do today? Where can I speak truth today, or tell a story, or disagree? It's going to be a daily thing.
Yes. We try to maintain a food bank and a benevolent fund at our church and be a community center for the whole community. So we've had partnerships with the other churches and the businesses and, the local civil government, and just try to be a presence that would be missed in our community if we just kind of shut our doors and went away overnight. Everyone would say, oh no, what are we going to do about all this stuff that they did? So we're trying to do that in the ways that make sense in our small community, is just wrap around those who are in need and with whatever services we can provide as a church. So that's a really good illustration. That's very helpful.
I think it's so hard to be in that place that you're in, where you kind of have to walk that line, but it feels like times are important. I don't know if you can tell your story about your son in that setting, but if there are stories that can be told to illustrate what's happening right now, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Yes, I also don't want to turn him into a political football because he's a human, but I also don't want to. There's all these lines that I don't know. It's really hard to be a pastor today. It really is. I mean, it's hard to be a human today, but it's really hard to be a pastor today, just from this perspective of, how do we avoid burnout and stay engaged with faithfulness to the cause that we are about?
I love Nadia Bolz-Weber, and she talked about how we are not built to care about everything, right? There's too many tabs open. We can't do it all.
Yeah.
So we have to ask the question, sometimes daily, what is mine to care about today? Because if I care about what I'm caring about and you care about what you care about, then eventually everything will get cared about, right? So what is mine to care about today? And then what is mine to do today? Because I can't do all the things. I want to make the phone calls, but I can't do that every day because it wears me out. I want to march in the marches, but I can't do every march, So what is mine to do today? And those two things, I think, will keep us from burnout. What is mine to care about? What is mine to do today? Otherwise, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We actually open our church with those prayers that bring us back into the moment instead of, being so concerned with what's happening in places that are not right here.
Yeah.
Which we need to be aware of those things because they will affect the here and now. But also, there's only so much we can do about the those things. I'm using that phrase, those things. It's only so much we can do about them.
Right.
And I think the grief that we're experiencing is like we just don't feel like we have empowerment any longer. Like we feel like things are being done to us, and taken away from us and ripped from us, which as a white man, that's a very new experience for me, being this systemic. So it's giving me some eyes to see some things that other marginalized communities have experienced their whole time. So what did these communities, the marginalized communities, like the Black Church of the South, through like Howard Thurman and MLK, and what do they have to teach us if they were around today? What would they say?
Well, we know that they talk about hope and had secret meetings where they honored their spiritual traditions together secretly if they had to. And the community was always very important. They had rituals. I think rituals right now could be very helpful to us. And that's why I started praying in the morning, the St. Patrick's breastplate prayer. I just needed a ritual to hang on to every morning to help me be grounded and focus on something positive. And so rituals, I think, are good in times of distress to ground us. Those are really good questions. I mean, you might have more answers than I do.
I got a lot of questions. I just feel very overwhelmed with the avalanche. Like normally, like one of the things that have been carried out by this administration would be enough for 3 months of news. But we have like 3 to 5 of those every day for the last 2 weeks. And it just feels like, yes, like the fire hose has been turned on. I was not out of the way. It just got hit. That's what it feels like.
And that's the point. I mean, if you read 2025 or whatever it's called, that's the whole point, is to overwhelm us so that we don't think about the important things. It's like we're just going to throw everybody into a pit of confusion so we can sneak through things that we really want, which is sending people to Mars or whatever. And I don't, everything's being challenged in court. Everything is, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just that it's barraging us with confusion right now. And I think that's really the point. So trying not to go down that roller coaster and try not to get on. Watch it from the sidelines and know that not everything coming at us is going to stick.
What is mine today to care about? That's a really, really good recommendation. Because I do feel very overwhelmed. And those daily practices, what do you do when you just have no motivation for a ritual or a practice and you just want to get up? I guess I'm being very honest. I wake up, I grab my coffee, and I just sit in my chair and I open up my phone and I pull up a game or scroll on Facebook because I just feel like I have no motivation to do the things that I know would make me feel better and healthier. but I'm just caught in this grief cycle. Like I'm not done grieving what I heard about yesterday, and there's 3 more things I got to grieve now today.
Right.
And, I don't feel like I'm in the healthiest place I've ever been in. Like I'm not, I'm not totally overwhelmed with despair or anything. It's just a really hard time. And I don't have a lot of motivation to do the things that I know would make me healthier and capable of handling things. How would one find motivation today when you're in this exhausted place?
I always tell people when they're grieving to lower the bar on their expectations. They might need to sleep more. They might need to eat chocolate more. They might need to cry more. They might have to have a really low bar. Today I took a shower. Right? Because our normal expectations, we don't have the energy for that. So lowering them makes it doable. What one thing do I really need to do today? I really need to get some food for my family. Okay, that's going to be my thing. And if I do that, I'm going to feel so happy and proud of myself. We just got to lower the bar.
I know, like, that can sound rather defeating, but it can also be empowering. Like, you mean I can do this today and feel okay? Like, lowering the bar doesn't mean the bar is lowered forever, but
No,
today,
grieving is so individual, and watching The Simpsons gives you joy. The Simpsons gives you joy. Do that, right? Look for the little bit of light you can find, and let yourself do it, and be encouraged by it. And then when you have a little more energy, maybe meet with a friend, get out of the house, go for a walk. Hug a tree. Nature is very healing, but it's so hard to go out of the house when you feel this way, right? That's why
especially when it's -3 when you wake up in the morning.
Right. Right. Watch a nature show. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, I got one last question. When you think about, you've written just a lot of books, a lot of fiction books and helpful books. When you think about the legacy you want to leave behind, being a mother and a grandmother and all that, what do you want as your legacy as you look back on your life and say, this is something I have accomplished? What do you think that is? What comes to mind?
Well, 2 things come to mind. I always said, on my tombstone, I would be happy if it just said she was kind. That's one thing I can do. I can be kind. Even not always. It's something I'm working on. But on my website, it says infusing reality with hope. And all of my books have that as a theme, that something hard is happening. And so in a lot of my books, it's something real. It's contemporary. But there's always hope. I always leave my readers with hope, because I believe hope is the most important thing to hang on to when things are hard. And if we could just find that little rope and hang on, hope is what I hope to leave my grandbabies.
Well, that is a wonderful legacy, kindness and hope. I like that. You can distill it down into those little phrases, those ideas. Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for coming on the show, giving me a little therapy session, direction session that I could share with the world. I hope there's something valuable within this that others could find. I know that I have found some value here and gained some insights. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show today.
Always. Thank you so much for having me. I love it.
Where would you like to send folks to connect with your work or to buy some of your books?
Oh, my name is spelled Jacci. So all of my stuff everywhere is under Jackie Turner. Even my website is JackieTurner.com. TikTok, Jackie Turner Author. So you can find me pretty easy.
That sounds easy. Well, how about I just put those in the show notes so people can just click on it?
All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, well, I hope that you can go and do a little bit of a hike today or get outside and find some joy and spread some hope around. You certainly gave me a little bit of joy and a little bit of hope today, so thank you.
Thank you, Tom.